Pleasure to be here in Louisville. I want to thank the Education First Foundation for making it possible for me to be here, and all of you for coming out during the middle of the day to be with me. I'm going to speak broadly about issues of reform, how to create schools that serve all of our children well. I'm going to draw on research and the experience of schools that are already doing it, because the good news is there are schools right now in America that are showing us that all kinds of children, regardless of their race, regardless of their learning abilities, regardless of the language they speak, regardless of how much money their parents earn, all kinds of children can succeed. What prevents that from happening in some places is the inability of the adults who work there to organize themselves effectively to meet their needs, and of the community and parents to support those children. I often say that if we cared about football as much as we do about children, we would have no problem in this country. But clearly we love football more, right? And that's reflected in the way we treat our children and treat our schools. So I want to start by saying that part of what we've got to do is we've got to ask, why has failure become such a common theme in so many school systems? And why is it that, and you just heard Andrea speak about so many students coming into high school who don't know basic math, is a reflection of a system that has some deep and systemic challenges. And I want to, again, remind you, this is not a Louisville problem, this is an American problem. Because the problems you're experiencing in Louisville are found in Chicago, they're found in New York, they're found in Boston, they're found in Los Angeles, they're found in big cities, small towns, they're found all over. So although we have examples of success, we also have lots of examples of failure. And so what we've got to be able to do is to understand how to turn failure into success, and what does that change look like. And part of it means reimagining how we think of school. And what I have here is we got to put teaching and learning right at the center of the work. And we'd say, well, what else are we doing in school? Well, I would say in a lot of schools that's not at the center. Okay? If it were at the center, we would do things differently. Right? You wouldn't see children ending up in high school who lack basic skills because we would have caught them earlier. Right? I often say when you see kids ending up in high school who lack basic, or are not ready for high school, it's because of educational malpractice. Because adults saw them and basically said, that's the next teacher's problem. Right? And they just kept passing them along. Right? And that speaks to a system that grows accustomed to failure. And whenever you have a system that grows accustomed to failure, what you find is a tendency to rationalize failure and to blame parents, blame teachers, blame the children themselves, blame the superintendent, blame the board. And what you can know for sure is any system that's caught up in who to blame is a system that's not going to move forward, because they're not focused on responsibility and what to do about it. Right? And that's the starting point, is what are you talking about here in Louisville? Are you talking about solutions, or are you talking about who to blame? Right? Because if you're talking about solutions, you'll approach the work differently than if you're talking about who to blame or rationalizing what's going on right now. So part of what we've learned now from over a generation of reform, because we've been reforming schools, a lot of people say since Sputnik, right? Since the Russians went into space, we wanted to catch the Russians. And President Kennedy said, well, we're going to do it by boosting achievement in science and math and physical education. And lo and behold, we caught them in space, but we didn't catch them or catch many others in science and math. And in fact, we're falling further and further behind. And part of what's going on is that we make change through gimmicks. And it never delivers because we overlook the fact that you've got to deal with the whole system. Right? You've got to focus on the quality of teaching. You've got to focus on parental involvement. You've got to focus on student engagement. You've got to focus on leadership. You've got to focus on school culture, attitudes, beliefs, expectations, relationships. Seymour Saracen, a psychologist at Yale University, wrote a book in 1972 called The Culture of Schools and the Problem of Change. You try to ask, why was it after so many reforms nothing had changed? He said that's because we ignored the fact that every school has its own culture. And if you don't change the culture, nothing changes. You can change the curriculum, but if you don't change attitudes and expectations, nothing changes. Right? So we've been in this cycle of reform, 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 but nothing's getting better. My colleague Charles Payne wrote a book called So Much Reform, Why So Little Change? About schools in Chicago. And what does he find when he goes into the school that Secretary Duncan has called dropout factories? He finds a sick and dysfunctional culture. Right? A culture of blame. Right? A culture where the children are running the building and the adults take no responsibility for it. And if you don't change that, then nothing changes. We also don't evaluate what we do. Sometimes we do things that actually work, and then we don't stick with it. We don't evaluate it. We don't figure out how to do more of it. Right? Every time we get a new superintendent, new reforms. New principal, new reforms. Sometimes they screw up things that were already working because they didn't stop to figure out what was working before they made changes. Right? And so we find ourselves spinning our wheels and making changes after changes, but not necessarily showing clear sign of getting better, although in some places we are. The last few years, we've been really fixated on assessment, this idea that testing will make our kids smarter. Right? And we've been through No Child Left Behind, we've been testing it more and more. And if you think about it, what we've ignored is the fact that assessment is only a tool. Children don't get smarter because you test them. It's the quality of instruction that they receive. It's our focus on the learning that results in children becoming more competent and having mastery. Right? Assessment is an important tool, especially if it's used for diagnostic purposes, because then you can figure out what they need to learn more of. But if you test the children in the spring and give the teachers the results in the fall when they no longer have the students, you're wasting everyone's time. All you're doing is using tests to rank children and to rank schools, as opposed to help them. Assessment is a tool. It's a valuable tool, but it's not magic. Right? So I heard a farmer in Wisconsin say, cows don't get fatter by weighing them. Right? Kids don't get fatter or smarter by testing them. Right? I heard a grandmother in New Orleans say, farmers don't blame the corn when the corn don't grow either, right? If you hear people blaming children because the test scores aren't high, you know something's wrong. We've had too much top-down change and not enough buy-in from the people who actually do the work, especially the classroom teacher. And if the teachers don't own it, if the teachers don't understand it, if the teachers don't buy into it, nothing changes. Nothing changes. And when you have a system that's in constant churn, you get teachers who become very cynical, because more often than not, change is done to them, not with them. Right? And consequently, they don't believe in it, they may not even fully understand it, and a lot of good teachers know sometimes the best thing to do is close your door and hope they'll go away. Hope they'll go away, because sometimes they will make things worse. Right? And so part of what we have is systems that don't change because there's not enough agreement on what we're going to do. And what we're going to see right now is the schools where we're making progress are places where there's buy-in, where there's organization around a common vision. There's a coherent strategy around how we're going to do things, around how we will teach, around how we will do something as simple as how we organize lunch, how we take attendance, how we deal with tardiness, how we deal with discipline. If the adults are not organized, the children will suffer. Finally, we haven't paid attention to the social needs of children. We've got kids coming to school who are hungry, kids coming to school who need eyeglasses and therefore can't read. We've got basic needs not being addressed and very little strategy on what to do about it. And here's one of the things we know. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know this. Hungry kids don't do that well in school. Right? Kids who haven't got a good night's sleep will have trouble concentrating. If we don't have strategies for addressing basic needs, we will overwhelm the children, the teachers, and the schools that serve the children with the greatest needs will always fail, because there's no strategy to address those needs. Those needs will manifest themselves as academic deficits, but in fact, they're not academic deficits, they're unmet social needs. And I would add here, in most schools, we will disproportionately punish the neediest children. And we will punish them because of their unmet needs. Child is angry because they're neglected at home, act out in school, what do? Send them home. A child is frustrated because they're in 8th grade and cannot read, what do? Send them down to the office. Sit in the office. Is there a reading specialist in that office? Right. Child is bullied and harassed and therefore brings a weapon to school. Number one reason why children will bring a weapon to school is for self-defense. We would not like weapons in our schools, but we should not like children to be bullied and harassed in our schools either. We need to be more thoughtful in how we approach this and how we understand the needs of our children. And if you think about the basic needs, Abraham Maslow talked about the hierarchy of human needs. What's at the base of the hierarchy? Need for food, for shelter, for safety, for love, support. Children who lack those basic needs don't thrive. Don't thrive. And then we have examples of successful schools, examples of schools that have turned around. I'm going to cite some of these examples. And the crazy thing is we don't learn from these examples. We do that in sports, don't we? We have a losing team. What do? They go and recruit an assistant coach from a winning team, right? So at least you know about winning, we're going to bring you in, right? We don't do that in education. In education, we will literally have a highly effective teacher in one room, right next door to a highly ineffective teacher. And there's no conversation, no sharing. In New York City, we have schools that are co-located in the same building, so there's more than one school in the same building. One school is high-performing, one school is not. No conversation among the principals and teachers about how come your school is doing so much better than ours. As educators and as communities, we have to be better about learning from examples of success. And those examples are here. I'm sure they probably have them right here in Louisville as well. Effective schools, and I'll describe some in a moment, have systems to monitor academic performance. They don't leave it to chance. It's not faith-based reform, it's evidence-based reform. What needs to be done differently? I'll give you an example. A school in Brooklyn, PS 28, school where 40% of the children are homeless, and it's a high-performing school. It's in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section. How do you get to be a high-performing school when you have that many children with that many needs? Because think about it, when you're homeless, you don't know where you're going to sleep. Right? You don't have stability in your life. You've got a lot of stress in your life. So this principal's decided she needs partnerships. So she has a partnership with the YMCA. Why? Because she needs a second shift that comes in when the school lets out, that will stay in that building and serve her kids until the shelter opens, because she doesn't want her kids out on the street, especially in the wintertime. It's a school that makes sure that the teachers get training on how to respond to the social and emotional needs of children. Social workers have those skills. Why? Because there are children with unmet social and emotional needs. And the principal realized if the teachers didn't have that training, they would send too many of those children off to special education, because the teachers simply didn't know how to serve them. It's a school that offers classes for parents, job training classes for parents, adult ed classes for parents. The school doesn't do it. It makes its space available to job training agencies that provide that service to parents, because they believe that if the parents are educated and employed, they'll do a better job with their children. And consequently, when I was there, I saw a little boy get up from his seat, go to use the bathroom, and come right back. And I said, wow, I'm impressed. She said, why? I said, I go to schools where they have to have guards in the bathrooms. She said, my kids have to walk on the most dangerous streets in New York City. She said, if they can't go to the bathroom responsibly, then I failed. PS 28 is a school that monitors every single student all year long and keeps copies of their work in folders, portfolios, because they want real evidence that their kids can read, that they can write, that they've mastered their mathematics. And they're not going to wait and pray come assessment time, I hope it works out. Oh, no, because they're monitoring all year long. They know exactly who's making progress, and those who are not making progress get more time, more attention from trained adults. They do early intervention, not late intervention. Early intervention makes more sense, doesn't it?